Within the Golden Order and Queen Marika's eternal rule, existed her trump card against any who would attempt to overthrow her. A being of unparalleled skill and strength. A being whose title is the death of the Demigods, Maliketh, the Black Blade. Today I have a rather short one because I've talked about him before and a little bit of his current day lore. But in this video we'll dive deeper into Maliketh's past. But of course, as with all things Elden Ring, that means a lot of mystery and not a lot of info. Regardless, we'll talk about it. Maliketh, as many in the comments have pointed out, is the sworn brother to Queen Marika the Eternal. Just to clarify on this means that they aren't actual siblings. Now, before anything, we have to take this information with a massive grain of salt. But this info comes from the Japanese translation of the game, which is the original language it was made in. Without the localization, the Japanese text points that Maliketh was Queen Marika's sworn brother, rather than half-brother. The difference between these two is that simply they have no blood relation, meaning Maliketh may not be a demigod. In any case, Maliketh was a shadowbound beast given to Queen Marika, and is eternally loyal to her, carrying out whatever she needed for her rise to power. But what she needed though wasn't very much. Marika's sole need for Maliketh was to seal and protect destined death, or better known as the Rune of Death. Now there is a fair bit of speculation involved here, but originally, destined death seemed to belong to the Gloam-Eyed Queen and her godskin apostles. Now there's a whole plethora of theories on who the Gloam-Eyed Queen is, but I won't get into any of them. What's important here is that she was defeated by Maliketh, and the power of the Black Flame, which was the power of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, was sealed away by Maliketh at Queen Marika's behest. There is also an alternate theory in which the Rune of Death was plucked from the Elden Ring by Queen Marika and given to Maliketh for safekeeping. The Godskin Apostles and the Gloam-Eyed Queen, having lost their power because the Rune of Death was plucked from the Elden Ring, challenged Maliketh in an attempt to retrieve the Rune of Death, but was defeated, which may be the reason why the Godskin duo is in Farum Azula. Either way, this is the moment that the Rune of Death was plucked away from the lands between, and this is the birth of the Golden Order. This allowed Maliketh to be the sole user of the power of the Rune of Death, making him the perfect executioner and deterrent against any who would attempt to overthrow Queen Marika, since Maliketh was pretty much the only being capable of delivering a true death to anyone in the lands between. While the position of executioner or something like Judge Dredd seemed like a viable career choice for Maliketh, this never came to pass. Queen Marika instead had him continue hiding away the Rune of Death for safekeeping. Now the Rune of Death was kept within the crumbling temple of Farum Azula, and if you've seen my last videos, I theorized that Farum Azula is the origin of both Queen Marika and Maliketh, thus making their former home a perfect place to keep the Rune of Death, as there are but a few ways to enter Farum Azula, and even after entering, there are many powerful dangers within the floating temple itself, and it would assist in keeping the Rune of Death safe. Though it seemed pretty safe here, the lore suggests that many have tried to challenge Maliketh before, either to try to take the Rune of Death or to simply attack the Golden Order. This is evident by his armor set, as it mentions that champions who challenged Maliketh knew what was at stake when they challenged him. They knew that it was going to be a one-way trip, either they win or they die, and that is what made them champions. His battle-forged strength and skill would make even the demigods fear him and his blade of destined death. Though his power was immense, it wasn't unbeatable. Powers such as the Blasphemous Claw exist, which allows one to parry destined death and even make Maliketh go blind to a certain degree. Powers such as these may have been why a fragment of the Rune of Death was stolen. But the question is, who gave this power to the wrong hands? The theory, and again do take this with a massive grain of salt, is that Queen Marika herself taught this power to Ronnie the Witch and the Black Knife assassins who carried out the Night of the Black Knives. As the Black Knife assassins were closely tied to Queen Marika, this allowed Ronnie to manipulate the fragment of the Rune of Death through a fearsome rite to create the death-infused knives of the Black Knife assassins, which was used to slay Godwyn the Golden. This mistake and defeat put Maliketh in a penitent state, and made him forever wonder how it came to that. And it also seems like he knows that Queen Marika may have been the one behind it, or at least may have had a hand in it. Either because he knew that the power used was hers, or maybe the secret of the rite is only known by Queen Marika, or maybe even because he confronted her. Even then though, his bond of loyalty cannot be broken, and he could only accept the failure of his duty. Because of this, the powers of the Rune of Death spread through the land through Deathroot and Godwyn's empty body. Due to this, Maliketh traveled to the Bestial Sanctum under a new name, known as Geraint the Beast Clergyman, in which he entrusted death hunters in the Golden Order to find Deathroot, namely specifically D and maybe his brother. They were tasked to find Deathroot so that he may eat it and cleanse it from the land. I know, a little weird. Maliketh would meet his death at the hands of the Tarnished, destined to be Lord, as the Tarnished would appear in the crumbling temple of Farum Azula. There he would go through all its defenses and eventually find Maliketh the Black Blade. He would still be guarding the Rune of Death. Now there are two dialogues here that are pretty interesting, because if you helped Geraint, he would appear more kind and not really understanding, but a little more confused as to why you, the Tarnished, would want the Rune of Death. If you didn't help him though, he would basically call you witless Tarnished and try to beat the shit out of you. Well, he would still try to beat the shit out of you even if you helped him. He would no longer accept that the Rune of Death would be stolen again. But you would need the rune free in order to slay a god. And despite helping Geraint, you would come face to face with Maliketh the Black Blade. Whether you would use the Blasphemous Claw or not, you, the Tarnished who would be Lord, would slay the death of the Demigods, unbounding the Rune of Death and releasing its power to the lands between, all in order to become the destined Elden Lord.